The morning sun cast long shadows across the United Nations Plaza in New York when the aliens finally arrived. It was June 15, 2157, a date that would be remembered throughout human history. The massive ship appeared without warning, its silver hull stretching nearly 2 miles across the clear blue sky. Peter Miller, Earth's chief of defense, stood beside President Adams as they watched 3 smaller vessels descend from the mothership. His hand rested on his holstered pistol, a habit from 30 years of military service. The gathered crowd of diplomats, military personnel, and press held their breath as the vessels touched down. The ship's doors opened with a soft hiss, revealing tall, elegant beings with bluish skin and flowing robes. Their leader, who introduced himself as High Council Member Morgan, stood nearly 8 feet tall and moved with otherworldly grace. People of Earth, Morgan spoke in perfect English, his translation device working flawlessly. We represent the Galactic Council, a federation of over 300 advanced civilizations. We have come to invite humanity to join our ranks. The announcement caused excited murmurs among the crowd. After centuries of wondering, humanity finally had its answer. They weren't alone in the universe. President Adams stepped forward, extending her hand in greeting. We are honored by your invitation and welcome the opportunity to join the galactic community. Morgan looked at her hand with barely concealed amusement before giving a slight bow. Charming customs. However, before we proceed with your integration, we must conduct a standard technological assessment. The assessment team arrived the next day. They were scientists and military experts from various council races, each carrying devices that made Earth's most advanced technology look like children's toys. They'd visited military bases, weapons factories, and research facilities across the globe. Their reaction to Earth's military technology was not what humanity expected. "You still use projectile weapons?" asked Lead Inspector Wilson, another council member, as he examined an advanced combat rifle. His 3-fingered hand held the weapon awkwardly. "How quaint. Like museum pieces from our own ancient history." Peter Miller watched as the alien inspector carelessly placed the rifle back on the table. "These weapons have served us well," he said carefully, keeping his voice neutral despite the obvious condescension. Wilson made a sound that might have been a laugh. "My dear Miller, the civilized galaxy moved beyond such primitive devices millennia ago. Energy weapons are the mark of an advanced society. These projectile weapons of yours, they're toys compared to even our most basic plasma rifles." To demonstrate his point, Wilson pulled out a sleek silver device from his robes. With a wave of his hand, a holographic target appeared at the far end of the shooting range. The alien weapon hummed to life, releasing a burst of brilliant blue energy that vaporized the target. "Impressive," Miller admitted, though his military instincts were already analyzing, assessing. He noticed how the weapon took nearly 2 seconds to power up before firing. "This is but a basic model," Wilson continued proudly. "Our warships carry weapons thousands of times more powerful, protected by energy shields that can deflect any plasma or laser attack." Miller nodded politely, but his mind was racing. The alien had specifically mentioned plasma and laser attacks. Nothing about kinetic weapons. Later that evening, in a secure underground facility, Miller met with President Adams and other military leaders. "They're so advanced, they've forgotten the basics," he explained, laying out his observations. "Their entire defensive technology seems built around stopping energy weapons. They've completely overlooked physical projectiles. Are you suggesting our primitive weapons might actually be effective against them?" President Adams asked, leaning forward in her chair. "I'm suggesting," Miller replied carefully, "that sometimes the old ways are the best ways. They've evolved so far beyond projectile weapons that they've left themselves vulnerable to them. It's like building the ultimate umbrella while forgetting that rocks can still fall from the sky." As the meeting continued into the night, none of them knew that this oversight would soon reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. For now, They simply listened and smiled as the council representatives continued to laugh at humanity's obsolete weapons. The humans would let them laugh. For now, the council's military inspection team spent the next week examining Earth's defensive capabilities. Their amusement grew with each passing day, much to the quiet frustration of human military leaders. In the massive underground facility of Fort Bradley, Lead Inspector Wilson and his team watched as human soldiers demonstrated their most advanced weapons. The shooting range echoed with the sound of gunfire as elite troops showed their skills with various firearms. "Such noise," Wilson said, covering his sensitive ears. "How do your soldiers communicate in battle with all this primitive chaos?" Major Robert Banks, the demonstration coordinator, kept his face carefully neutral. "We have effective communication systems, sir. The noise hasn't been a problem for centuries of warfare." Wilson waved his hand dismissively. "Centuries of warfare using outdated technology. Watch this instead." He signaled to his assistants, who brought forward several cases of alien weapons. The cases opened with a soft hum, revealing sleek rifles that looked more like art pieces than weapons. They were made of a silvery metal that seemed to flow like liquid in the light. Wilson lifted one with practiced grace. "This is a standard-issue Council Defense Force rifle," he explained. "It fires concentrated plasma bolts that can melt through any known armor. Observe." He aimed at a steel target. The weapon hummed for a moment, then released a bolt of brilliant green energy. The steel target didn't just break. It melted into a glowing puddle. The human soldiers watched in silence. Major Banks noticed something interesting. The weapon took almost 2 full seconds to charge before firing. In those 2 seconds, a trained human soldier could fire several rounds from a standard rifle. Wilson's team then demonstrated their shield technology. They set up a portable energy barrier and invited the humans to fire at it. Bullets bounced off harmlessly, falling to the ground like rain against an umbrella. "You see," Wilson said proudly, "your projectiles are useless against even our basic shields. This is why the galaxy moved beyond such weapons ages ago." What Wilson didn't notice was Major Banks watching how the shield flickered slightly differently with each impact. The bullets weren't penetrating. True, but they were forcing the shield to work harder than the aliens seemed to realize. Later that day, in a secure meeting room, Major Banks met with Peter Miller and other military leaders. The room was swept for surveillance devices 3 times before they began talking. "Their weapons are impressive," Banks admitted, "but they have clear weaknesses. The charge time alone makes them impractical in close combat situations." Miller nodded, pulling up footage from the demonstration. "Look at their shield technology too. It's highly effective, but notice how it ripples with each bullet impact. It's clearly designed to disperse energy weapons, not handle physical force." "Could we overwhelm it?" General Thompson asked, leaning forward in his chair. "Perhaps," Banks replied. "They've clearly forgotten that sometimes the simplest solution is the most effective. Their shields might stop a few bullets, but what about sustained fire from multiple weapons? What about artillery shells? Rails guns?" The meeting continued late into the night as they analyzed every detail from the week's demonstrations. A pattern was emerging. The Council's technological advancement had led to a dangerous blind spot. In space, things were no different. The Council's representatives proudly showed off their massive warships, protected by energy shields that could shrug off direct hits from plasma cannons and laser arrays. They never thought to test these shields against simple kinetic weapons. Primitive species always focus on energy weapons once they reach space, Wilson explained condescendingly to the human observers. "It's a natural progression. Your attachment to projectile weapons is unusual." The humans nodded politely, but their minds were working. In orbital shipyards across Earth, engineers were already drawing up plans for railguns that could be mounted on spacecraft. Sometimes, being considered primitive had its advantages. The Council's assessment would continue for another month. They would keep laughing at human weapons, keep dismissing Earth's military as hopelessly outdated. and the humans would let them laugh. After all, the best advantage is the one your enemy doesn't know you have. In the weeks following the Council's weapons assessment, Earth's military installations buzzed with quiet activity. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, in a high-security facility known as the Bunker, Earth's top military leaders gathered to discuss their findings. Peter Miller stood before a large screen showing detailed scans of the Council's shield technology. The room was filled with generals, weapons experts, and scientists from every major nation on Earth. They had one goal: to turn their supposed weakness into strength. "Their overconfidence is our opportunity," Miller said, pointing to the data streams. "Every test confirms it. Their shields are designed purely for energy weapons. They haven't bothered with kinetic protection for centuries." Dr. Anna White, Earth's leading weapons developer, stepped forward. "We've analyzed the shield readings from every demonstration. When hit with our primitive bullets, the shields actually waste energy trying to deflect them like plasma shots. They're using the wrong defense against the wrong weapon." The room erupted in technical discussions. On one screen, simulation after simulation showed how traditional bullets, artillery shells, and even simple arrows interacted with alien shield technology. The results were promising. "Look at this," Dr. White continued, playing a slowed-down video. "Their shields take 1.3 seconds to recognize and respond to physical projectiles. That's more than enough time for our faster rounds to pass through." General Thompson raised his hand. "What of our space defenses? The Council thinks we're scrambling to build energy weapons like theirs." Miller smiled for the first time in days. "That's exactly what we want them to think. Show them the Eagle project." Dr. White brought up new schematics on the main screen. They showed massive rail guns designed to be mounted on spacecraft. These weapons could accelerate simple metal slugs to incredible speeds, turning them into devastating projectiles. "Basic physics," she explained. "No fancy energy weapons, no plasma, no lasers, just good old-fashioned kinetic impact. Their shields won't know what hit them." In factories across the globe, hidden from the Council's observations, production shifted. While Earth maintained a public facade of developing energy weapons to catch up with galactic standards, their real focus lay elsewhere. The humans built more traditional weapons, but with modern improvements. Railguns that could fire faster than any chemical propellant. Advanced artillery with shells designed specifically to exploit the weaknesses in alien shield technology. Simple, effective, and completely overlooked by their advanced allies. 1 month into this secret preparation, Miller received an unexpected visit from Council Representative Morgan. They met in Miller's office at the Pentagon, surrounded by deliberately placed primitive military memorabilia. "We're pleased to see Earth embracing more advanced technology," Morgan said, his tall frame lounging comfortably in a chair designed for humans. "Your efforts to develop energy weapons show promise." Miller nodded, keeping his expression neutral. On his desk sat reports about Earth's actual weapons development, carefully hidden under progress updates on their decoy energy weapon projects. "We're learning a lot from the Council's example," Miller replied carefully. "Though some of our military leaders are reluctant to completely abandon traditional weapons." Morgan made that now familiar sound of alien amusement. "Yes, we've noticed. Such attachment to outdated technology is common among younger species. You'll grow out of it." After Morgan left, Miller immediately called an emergency meeting. In a secure underground room, he addressed Earth's military command. "The Council's blindness to our real capabilities is now our greatest asset," he explained. "They're so convinced of their superiority that they're not even looking for alternatives." "How long can we keep this up?" someone asked from the back of the room. "As long as we need to," Miller replied. "They see what they expect to see, a primitive species struggling to catch up. Meanwhile, we'll continue developing weapons they've forgotten how to defend against." The meeting ended with a new sense of purpose. Humanity had found its edge in the galaxy, hidden in plain sight. The Council's laughter at their primitive weapons would continue, and Earth would let them laugh. After all, as an old Earth saying went, "He who laughs last, laughs best." The attack came without warning. 3 unmarked alien ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel near the Mars colony, their weapons already charged. Space pirates, drawn by rumors of an easy target, a primitive world just joining the galactic community. Humans. The pirate leader's voice boomed through the communication channels. Your colony will surrender its resources. Your primitive defenses are no match for our superior technology. In his command center on Mars Base 1, Commander Jack Walker allowed himself a small smile. After months of preparation, they would finally see if Earth's theories about alien shields were correct. "This is Mars colony defense," he responded calmly. "You are in restricted space. Leave immediately." The pirates responded with laughter, followed by a barrage of plasma fire at the colony's outer buildings. Their energy shields glowed brightly, protecting them from what they assumed would be a futile response from the humans. "All defense stations, execute Protocol Alpha," Walker ordered quietly. Hidden gun ports opened across the Martian surface, but instead of the energy weapons the pirates expected, they faced something far older and far more dangerous: railroad gun installations, powered by modern technology but based on simple physics, took aim. The first volley caught the pirates completely by surprise. Solid metal slugs, accelerated to incredible speeds, struck their shields. The energy barriers, designed to deflect plasma and laser fire, failed to react in time. Multiple projectiles punched through, tearing into the ship's hulls. "Impossible!" The pirate leaders screamed over the comm. "Their weapons are primitive." "How?" A second volley cut off his transmission. The pirates attempted to return fire, but their weapons needed precious seconds to charge. In those seconds, more railgun shots found their marks. The first pirate ship spun out of control, atmosphere venting from multiple hull breaches. The second tried to raise its power to the shields, but this only made them less effective against the physical projectiles. It exploded spectacularly as a slug found its power core. The third ship, seeing the fate of its companions, attempted to flee. It managed to turn around, but not before several shots damaged its engines. The ship limped away into space, trailing debris. The entire battle lasted less than 5 minutes. In the aftermath, Commander Walker immediately contacted Earth. Peter Miller and the military command watched the battle recordings with intense satisfaction. "Complete success," Walker reported. "Their shields were useless against kinetic weapons, just as we predicted. They were so focused on stopping energy attacks that they never saw the real threat coming." Miller nodded, already thinking ahead. "What's the status of the colony?" "Minor damage from their initial attack," Walker replied. "Nothing we can't repair in a few days. The real victory here is confirmation. Our primitive weapons work exactly as planned." News of the battle spread quickly through galactic channels, but not in the way humans expected. The council representatives on Earth dismissed the pirates' defeat as a fluke, a lucky break for the primitive species. Clearly, the pirates were using outdated equipment. Council Representative Morgan declared when asked about the incident, "No properly maintained modern shields would fail against simple projectile weapons." In his office, Miller read Morgan's statement with growing satisfaction. "They still don't get it," he told his assembled staff. "They're so convinced of their technological superiority that they're making excuses instead of seeing the truth." "Should we tell them?" Major Banks asked. Miller shook his head. "Let them keep underestimating us." The pirates learned the hard way. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. In the weeks that followed, Earth accelerated its weapons production. The success at Mars proved their theories correct, but Miller and the others knew this was just the beginning. Somewhere out there, the surviving pirate ship was limping home with a message. The humans weren't as primitive as everyone thought, and their guns worked just fine. The warning came from an unexpected source. A junior council member, secretly sympathetic to Earth, sent a coded message to Peter Miller. "They're coming." The council voted. Earth must be civilized by force. Miller was in the middle of his morning coffee when he decoded the message. Within minutes, Earth's defense network went to full alert. The order went out to all military installations. Operation Rolling Thunder was now active. In high orbit, the Council's diplomatic fleet suddenly changed formation. 20 massive warships, their energy weapons powering up, prepared to force Earth's compliance with galactic standards. People of Earth, Council Commander Reed's voice boomed across all communication channels. Your continued reliance on primitive weapons threatens galactic stability. For your own good, you will be occupied and reformed. President Adams, standing in the secure bunker beneath the White House, gave a single nod to Miller. Show them how primitive we are. The response began with silence. The Council fleet, expecting immediate surrender from such a backward world, was puzzled by the lack of reaction. Then their sensors detected movement from Earth's surface. Hundreds of railgun installations, hidden in mountains, deserts, and beneath the oceans, took aim. Orbital defense platforms, disguised as communication satellites, powered up their kinetic weapons. The Council fleet's energy shields hummed to life, ready to deflect any primitive attack. They weren't ready for what hit them. The first volley consisted of thousands of hypervelocity rounds fired simultaneously from multiple angles. The Council's shift shields, designed to block energy weapons, failed to stop the physical projectiles. Hull breaches appeared across multiple vessels. Impossible, Commander Reed shouted as his flagship shuddered under the impact. Return fire. Show these primitives real weapons. The Council fleet launched a devastating barrage of plasma and laser fire. Earth's defensive shields, a combination of alien and human technology, absorbed most of the attack. Meanwhile, the second volley of kinetic rounds was already on its way. 3 Council ships exploded as railroad slugs found their power cores. 2 more spun out of formation, their engines destroyed. The remaining ships tried to adjust their shields, but they had never been designed to handle physical impacts at these speeds. Their weapons are unstoppable. A Council officer screamed over the open channel. The shields aren't made for this. Miller watched from the command center as humanity's primitive weapons tore through the most advanced fleet in the galaxy. Decades of being underestimated, of being laughed at, had led to this moment. The battle lasted less than 30 minutes. When it ended, 15 Council ships were destroyed or disabled. The remaining 5, including Commander Reed's flagship, hung helplessly in orbit, their weapon systems destroyed by precise kinetic strikes. This is impossible. Reed's voice trembled over the communication channel. You're savages, primitives. Your weapons are outdated. No, Miller replied calmly. We simply remembered what you forgot. Sometimes the old ways work best. Now about those occupation plans. The surviving Council ships surrendered. News of the battle spread across the galaxy at faster-than-light speeds. The mighty Council fleet, defeated by a primitive world using obsolete weapons. In the aftermath, President Adams addressed the world. Today, we proved that human ingenuity and determination can overcome any challenge. We didn't win because we were stronger or more advanced. We won because we were underestimated, and we used that to our advantage. Miller stood in his office later that night, watching the disabled Council ships being towed into holding positions. A message arrived from the sympathetic Council member who had warned them. The galaxy is in shock. No one believed physical weapons could defeat modern shields. Everything is about to change. Indeed, everything had changed. Earth was no longer seen as a primitive backwater. Their obsolete weapons had proven more effective than centuries of advanced technology. The Council had laughed at human guns. They weren't laughing anymore. News of Earth's victory spread through the galaxy like wildfire. On 100 worlds, species that the Council had labeled primitive watched recordings of the battle with growing interest. For the first time in centuries, the Council's technological superiority had been proven false. In the Grand Council chamber on their capital world, chaos reigned. Representatives from 300 worlds argued as they watched the battle footage again and again. "Look how their simple weapons penetrated our best shields," shouted the delegate from Proxima, a world that had also kept some of their old weapons. "We've been fools to completely abandon physical armaments." The Council's military experts tried desperately to explain the defeat. Their excuses grew weaker with each viewing of Earth's victory. Meanwhile, on Earth, Peter Miller's office had become the busiest place in the solar system. Delegates from dozens of primitive worlds arrived seeking military advice. Many of these species had been forced to adopt energy weapons despite their own effective traditional armaments. "Our world has caves full of old railgun designs," explained the ambassador from Centauri Prime. "The Council made us shut them down, called them obsolete. But now—" Miller nodded, understanding perfectly. "Now you're thinking of bringing them back." "With Earth's help," the ambassador replied. "We need your expertise in combining old weapons with new technology." Similar conversations happened across Earth as more species sought human guidance. The planet that had been mocked as primitive was now seen as visionary. They had proven that sometimes the old ways were still the best ways. In secret meetings, Earth formed alliances with these like-minded worlds. They shared their designs for modern railguns, taught others how to upgrade traditional weapons with new technology, and helped develop defenses that could stop both energy and kinetic attacks. The Council's power began to crumble. More worlds started testing their old weapons against modern shields. The results were always the same. Energy shields designed for plasma and laser fire proved weak against physical projectiles. "The galaxy is changing," Miller told President Adams during a late-night meeting. "The Council's technological arrogance is backfiring. Every world they called primitive is now questioning their authority." Adams studied the reports from across the galaxy. "Are we ready for this responsibility? Being the leaders of this revolution?" "We don't have a choice," Miller replied. "We proved it could be done. Now others are following our example." The Council tried to maintain control. They threatened sanctions against worlds that restored their kinetic weapons. But their threats rang hollow after their defeat at Earth's hands. More and more species began to resist the Council's technological demands. In the shipyards orbiting Earth, engineers worked with allies from other worlds to design new vessels. These ships carried both energy and kinetic weapons, protected by shields that could stop all types of attacks. It was a perfect blend of old and new technology. 3 months after Earth's victory, the first joint military exercise was held. Ships from 20 primitive worlds gathered in the solar system. Their weapons arrays included everything from advanced railguns to plasma cannons, proving that both technologies could work together. The Council could only watch as their former subjects formed new alliances. Their centuries of forcing worlds to abandon effective weapons had created a galaxy full of potential rebels, and Earth was showing them all how to fight back. "We never wanted this conflict," President Adams announced to the Galactic press. "We simply refused to abandon weapons that worked. Now we offer our knowledge to any world that wants to remember its own strength." In his office, Miller watched ships from distant worlds practicing joint maneuvers. The Council had tried to force the galaxy into a single technological path. Instead, they had created the seeds of their own revolution. And it all started because they laughed at human guns. 1 year after Earth's historic victory, the galaxy had changed forever. The Great Hall of the new Galactic Alliance, built in orbit around Earth, hosted representatives from over 100 worlds. The massive window behind the speaker's podium showed both Earth and the Moon, a reminder of humanity's rise from a primitive world to a galactic power. Peter Miller, now serving as Earth's defense coordinator for the Alliance, stood at the podium addressing the gathered delegates. Behind him, screens showed the latest advancements in combined weapons technology. "The age of single-path technology is over," he declared to the packed hall. "Our strength lies in diversity, in using every effective tool at our disposal, whether it's an energy weapon or a simple bullet." The assembled delegates nodded in agreement. Many of them wore traditional weapons alongside modern energy pistols, a growing trend that symbolized the galaxy's new approach to military technology. In the shipyards around Mars, the results of this new philosophy were clear. The latest Alliance warships carried both railguns and plasma cannons. Their shields could stop energy weapons and kinetic projectiles. It was a perfect blend of old and new, proving that no single approach was superior. The old council, now reduced to less than 50 worlds, had finally accepted reality. Their representatives arrived at the Alliance Hall that day to negotiate new terms. "We were wrong," Council leader Morgan admitted, his once proud stance now humble. "We became so focused on advancing one type of technology that we forgot the wisdom of the past. We allowed our pride to blind us." President Adams, representing Earth in the negotiations, responded gracefully. "The future belongs to those who can learn from both past and present. We invite the Council worlds to join our alliance as equals, not as superiors." The terms were simple. All worlds would be free to develop their military technology as they saw fit, as long as they maintained galactic peace. The era of forced technological conformity was over. Later that evening, in his office aboard the Alliance station, Miller reviewed reports from across the galaxy. Worlds that had hidden their old weapons for centuries were now openly improving them. Species that once laughed at primitive technology now eagerly studied Earth's combat doctrine. "Did you ever imagine this?" Major Banks asked, now serving as Miller's deputy. "When they first arrived and laughed at our guns, did you think we'd end up here?" Miller looked out his window at the Earth below. "We didn't want to change the galaxy," he replied. "We just refused to change ourselves when we knew we were right." The next day, the Alliance unveiled its new training academy. Built on the Moon, it would teach military officers from all worlds about both energy and kinetic weapons. The first class included students from former Council worlds, eager to learn what they had once dismissed. In the Academy's main hall, they mounted the first gun ever fired against a Council ship, the simple railgun that had proved their shields weren't invincible. Below it, a plaque read, "Remember that wisdom can come from anywhere, and strength takes many forms." As Miller walked through the Academy, watching students from 100 worlds learning to use both old and new weapons, he remembered the Council's first visit to Earth, how they had laughed at human weapons, how they had called Earth primitive. Now those same weapons had changed the galaxy, not through force, but by proving that progress didn't always mean abandoning the past, that sometimes the old ways still worked best, that being primitive didn't mean being wrong. The galaxy had learned its lesson. No more would any species be mocked for keeping traditional weapons. No more would technological arrogance dictate military doctrine. The future belonged to those who could embrace both past and present. And it all started because the Council laughed at human guns, until they fired.